Chapter 12. The Mines. 11th hour, 11th day, 2nd month. Year 807, post-Heavenfall. Light faded from the mining entrance and the temperature grew colder with each step as they pressed deeper into the tunnel. A salty tang could be tasted in the air, and slick moisture was visible on the surfaces as it glistened under the pale glow of overhead lamps. The group followed a railway that bisected the passage and forced them to squeeze past mining carts laden with ore and stone on more than one occasion. Eventually, the adit opened into a large series of corridors carved into the earth with wide pillars of rock in between. Scattered tools and machinery were left abandoned during the evacuation, but there were no signs of the assailant himself. "Here are the first mining chambers," said the guide for Lai's men. "If you follow that tunnel over there, you'll be able to get to the new south expansion." The spear commander gave his thanks before turning to Dodak. "All right, Sentinel. My group will sweep this area, while yours take the other. Good luck, stay safe, and make a lot of noise if you need help. Tyran protects." "Likewise," Dodak acknowledged as he shook Lai's hand before leading his team away. As they ventured further toward the southern mines, the Sentinel asked the candidates, "Have any of you dealt with earth elementals, or any elementals before?" "I have years ago on the coast back home," Zarin confirmed. "My shipmates and I encountered a living wave out at sea, and it nearly capsized our vessel. We're pretty sure it was an untethered water elemental." "Untethered? What does that mean?" Barnov asked. "It means it's wild without a master to serve it," Chin answered. "How does that happen?" "Either the elemental is too powerful for a spellcaster and breaks free, or it forms naturally in the wild from an abundance of arc in the environment. Usually, they're the latter. I'm pretty sure none of the ones we might have to deal with are untethered," Dodak inferred. "Don't let your guard down, though. Elementals are masters of camouflage, and the ones Ulitska used can phase into the earth like ghosts and won't leave any traces. The only hint of them is if you feel growing tremors right before they emerge." They proceeded with caution, navigating the corridors while remaining ever vigilant of every angle. Arya's sharp gaze swept across every direction as she scanned for signs of potential hazards. Her elven eyes dilated widely to enhance her perception and brighten the images of her surroundings. Nevertheless, Dodak's warning echoed in her thoughts and reminded her that her visual senses would be of little use if the elementals could effortlessly pass through solid rock. The constant apprehension of an ambush was mentally draining, and Arya could hear herself breathing heavily. "Are you all right?" Zarin asked her with a whisper. "Not particularly," she admitted, with her grip tightening harder on the mace. "You don't suppose I can turn around, step outside and get some fresh air?" "No," he answered with a rueful chuckle. "I'm nervous too, but it'll be all right. We'll stay close and watch each other if anything happens. The men-at-arms are also close by to help." "You're right. Thank you." Arya's breaths quieted as she found his words reassuring. When the party reached the tunnel to the southern chambers, Dodak ordered the group to stack up along the wall of the entrance. From the edge of the opening, he peeked down the path for a few moments before turning back to his initiates. "No signs of obvious traps, but it's a good spot for one. I'm going to change march order and have Arya behind me, followed by Kin, Zarin, and Barnov bringing up the rear." "You want me in the back, Sentinel?" Barnov frowned. "Wouldn't it make sense for me to be in the front with you?" "No, I want you to cover our backs in case any emerge from behind." "Oh, okay, I understand, sir," Barnov replied, and the group quickly changed their formation. "Check your gear. Chin, are your spells ready?" Dodak asked. The druid patted his belt containing multiple pouches of spell ingredients. "Yes, Sentinel." "At my signal, move swiftly so we can clear the tunnel into the next area, and then fan out. Remember to keep some distance away from the walls. Is everyone ready?" The team nodded, and Ariya found herself breathing heavily again. Dodak raised his shield in one arm and initiated a countdown on his other hand. 3, 2, 1. With synchronized precision, the party charged forward and braced themselves for what lay ahead. Unlike the entrance tunnel, this one was narrower and only afforded them enough room to move comfortably in a single-file line. The surrounding walls and ceilings were much more rugged, as Ariya had to lower her head multiple times to avoid bumping into the protruding rocks overhead. Dodak, being a halfling, had no issues navigating the way, and the candidates had to quicken their stride to keep up with the more nimble Sentinel. Unexpectedly, their mentor held up his war pick and halted. "Do you hear that?" he whispered. The candidates froze with silence as they tried to sense what he perceived. Seconds of agonizing tension passed, and the initiates collectively were unable to detect anything out of the ordinary. It was not until a moment later that Ariya started hearing what sounded like scratching coming from inside the wall next to Dodak. Before she could issue a warning, the rock split open into a 2-foot-wide crack and vertically enlarged to form a mockery of jaws and teeth. A bulbous shape surrounding the mouth lunged at the Sentinel and would have devoured his diminutive form if it were not for his quick reflexes, raising a shield to wedge its maw and prevent it from biting into his flesh. A second one emerged from across the wall and attempted to snap at Dodak, but the halfling was already alert, and his warpick struck the creature as it lunged at him. As the entities reeled from the Sentinel's indomitable defences, Ariya was finally able to behold them in their true form. They were a spherical amalgamation of dirt, mud, and stone that constantly swirled and shifted into shape. Their diameter made them almost as tall as Dodak, and they had no analogous facial features besides mouths bearing knife-like rocks as teeth. There was a cry at the rear of the formation as Barnov came under attack by another one of the living boulders. Chin rushed to support her and extended their hand out to unleash a blast of arc, laced with jagged icicles and freezing air. "I could use some assistance here," Dodak shouted, as one of the earth elementals continued to gnash at his shield, and the other one positioned itself for a second pounce. His cry snapped Ariya out of her stupor, and her mind ignited towards finding a solution to assist. The narrow width of the tunnel made it impossible for her to squeeze past the Sentinel. However, the halfling's short stature and the small size of the boulder creatures created a gap the elf thought she might be able to jump through. "Just like Dad taught you," the elf told herself, before diving into the opening between the ceiling and Dodak's head. She somersaulted forward over him and the creature he was engaged with and rolled to her feet. As the second of the living boulders flew into the melee, Ariya swung her mace sideways and sent it crashing into the wall. The blow reduced a significant chunk of its mass, yet it remained defiant by reforming in its jaws in her direction. A reverberating boom suddenly echoed, and the elemental exploded into a mess of fragments. Ariya looked in the direction of the noise and saw Zarin cocking back the bolt of his rifle, readying for another shot. Dodak, meanwhile, shifted his weight and purposely allowed his own assailant to momentarily slip past, before pinning it between the wall and his shield. Arc pulsed from his muscles to the head of his warpick, and he brought it down hard, spilling its rocky innards all over the floor. With the frontward elementals destroyed, Dodak, Ariya, and Zarin turned their attention to the rear of the line, where Barnov and Chin continued fighting to the final one. Barnov furiously swung with her great axe at the creature. Unfortunately, it was remarkably agile, as it rolled away from her strikes and countercharged with a tackle into the torso, leaving her breathless. As it was about to execute another strike, Ariya intervened and delivered a devastating blow with her mace, while Zarin finished it off with another gunshot. The team closed ranks and waited for half a minute before Dodak acknowledged all the immediate threats were destroyed. "Everyone all right?"
"I'm good,"
Barnov said breathlessly, clutching her ribs. I don't think anything is broken. My Aegis took most of the hit, but it's definitely going to leave a bruise. Thanks, everyone, and good kill, Zarin. As Zarin was about to reply to the compliment, he was interrupted by the sounds of hammering coming from both ends of the tunnel, followed by falling dust and dirt from above. That's not the miners, is it? He asked. The tunnel answered through vibrations and a crackling sound in the ceiling. Move! Dodak shouted, and the group sprinted for the exit. As they neared the end of the passage, they saw the source of the distressing sounds. 2 more boulder elementals slammed their bodies into the support beams, and each impact reverberated the entire tunnel. Several beams have already fallen, and it was only a matter of time until they did enough damage to seal the party in. Zarin and Chin unleashed suppressing snapshots of bullets and arc, as Dodak, Barnov and Ariya charged ahead to close the distance. Once again, the Sentinel single-handedly dispatched one of the elementals, with a single powerful swing, while the candidates worked together to focus on the other. Overwhelmed by the barrage coming from multiple directions, the creature was quickly obliterated into no more than a muddy spatter. With the escape route secured, the group swiftly exited into the next section of the mines, containing the other set of excavated rooms and pillars. The distant pounding of the elementals on the other end of the tunnel continued until there was a resounding crash of falling rocks and a wave of pressurized air reaching the party. Not a moment too soon, Ariya panted. At least we know we're heading in the right direction. But now we're cut off from the other team, Barnov pointed out, while still clutching her lower chest in pain. Dodak called Chin's attention and motioned them over to the barbarian. The druid approached her, asking for permission to physically treat her wounds, which Barnov consented. Their palm radiated a soft green light that shimmered upon contact with the injury. As Ariya glanced at the process, she thought she might have smelled the scent of mint emitting from the spell. Thanks, that feels a lot better, Barnov said with a stretch. You can touch me any time I'm hurt, she said with a wink. Chin walked away with no response, while the barbarian snickered at herself. We need to keep moving, Dodak ordered, and began walking away from the collapsing tunnel. The remaining living boulders might be phasing through, so we don't want to be caught between them. And whatever else Uliska throws at us. The team unanimously agreed and swiftly distanced themselves from the tunnel, which continued to rumble ominously. As they moved along the perimeter of the new development, Barnov whispered a question. What's the deal with all these elementals? Why are there so many of them here? Several organisations conjure elementals to help them do menial labour, Dodak answered. If there are spellcasters adept at creating and controlling them, they can be used to assist with all sorts of different types of work. Looks like they were using them to help excavate where it was harder to reach with machinery. That would explain why some of the jobs look rougher than others, Zarin noted, as he stared up at one of the pillars. Compared to the previous section, this one was much smaller and still in development. Many of the pillars were thicker and unmined, making the open areas resemble more like narrow hallways. I'm surprised we don't see more of them everywhere, if they're so helpful. They usually don't last, Ariya added. Conjured ones only stick around for 1 to 10 minutes before dissipating. Maybe we should be thankful for that. I'd imagine if there were more of them, a lot of people wouldn't have jobs. Wait, Ariya whispered. If they last for a few minutes, then the ones we just encountered were done recently. If that's the case... Look out! Dodak shoved Ariya out of the way before a massive fist of rocks exploded out of the mining pillar and nearly flattened her. Dodak embedded his warpick into the entity's arm in retaliation, yanking more of its form out of the column to be exposed to the party. Unlike the living boulders, this one was humanoid in form and towered over everyone at more than 10 feet in height. Its exterior was armoured in rubble, and its limbs were broad and designed for pulverizing. With its free arm, the elemental attempted to swat at Dodak as if he was an insect. but the halfling blocked it at the expense of shattering his shield to splinters. In response, it used its other arm to pin the sentinel up against the pillar and attempted to crush him. Zarin unleashed a salvo of shots from his rifle, while Chin materialized a water spout to stagger the earthly giant and release its prey. Melee strikes, executed by Ariya and Barnov, followed after. Ariya's mace only found itself glancing blows off the creature's shell, but Barnov's great axe cut a deep wedge into the creature's abdomen. As she forcefully yanked back her weapon, the elemental crumbled. "Got him!" Barnov exclaimed victoriously. "I wouldn't be so sure." Chin pointed to the remains as it gradually sank into the ground and disappeared. "Sneaky bastard," Dodak scoffed in a mildly impressed manner. "Looks like it's heading down that way to ambush us again."
"How can you tell?" Ariya inquired.
"I can feel and hear rumbling underneath. Also," he pointed to the ground. The detail was difficult to see at first, but the group spotted grains of sand subtly vibrating, as if indicating where the elemental was moving. They followed the creature down the corridor until it turned directly into another pillar and embedded itself within. "Looks like it's been commanded to ambush intruders using the same trick," Dodak inferred. "Chin, can you bulk up my Aegis? I'm going to go in as bait to lure it out, and you and Zarin back me up. Meanwhile, Ariya and Barnov sneak up on it from the other side of the pillar and flank it. At my signal, we hit it hard at once when it pops out." "We can do that, Sentinel," Barnov assured. "Be as quiet as you can," Dodak added, as Chin incanted a spell that created a glowing sheen on him. "These elementals can still sense you through rocks." With his defences raised, the advisor took the lead on steadily advancing toward the pillar where the creature hid. Meanwhile, the two women split away and followed the path around as suggested. Their eyes warily remained locked onto the rock, and their weapons tightly raised up in case the creature would ambush them. Ariya took painstaking care to sneak up as quietly as she could. Her mind stayed attentive to not place her entire foot down at once, and to start from the edge of her heel and slowly roll to the ball. There was little ambient noise to mask her approach, so she would occasionally stop to both survey her surroundings through hearing and to mimic the way critters would do the same. All of a sudden, Ariya felt afflicted by something that could undermine her efforts. What began as a molecular spark immediately cascaded from a tiny irritant to full-blown inflammation and itch of the nasal cavity. Before Ariya could move her hand to silence it, it was already too late as she let out an audible sneeze. She and Barnov instantly froze and held their breaths as they checked for signs of being detected. Dozens of quickened heartbeats passed, and their infiltration seemed to remain unnoticed. That assumption ended when the elemental exploded from the pillar and grabbed Ariya with both of its hands. The elf would have been squeezed to a splatter of gore, if not for the strength of her own Aegis pushing against death. Regardless, she felt her barrier quickly crumpling under pressure of the creature's tightening vice grip. Ariya desperately kicked with her dangling legs and tried to scream, yet all she could muster was a breathless croak, with the air already crushed out of her lungs. As her vision blurred from tears of pain and helplessness, she saw a flash of light explode from the very edge of her sight. Ariya felt a downward lurch of gravity when Zarin's bullet popped a crater in the construct's arm and released her. She aimlessly flailed with her mace and stumbled away, while Barnov charged in to cover her retreat. Like a wild animal, the barbarian pounced and restrained the elemental's remaining arm with all four of her limbs, causing it to wobble off balance and topple to the floor. Dodak seized the opportunity to pile into the fray and punch holes with his warpick. Even so, the elemental was far from destroyed, and surged with newfound strength by throwing the Barnov off before throwing its massive fist at the Sentinel. Dodak dodged the first attempt and rolled out of the way from the backhand before Chin propelled another blast of primal arc into the creature. Thick vines burst from the hit and wrapped around its leg, immobilizing it. Finally recovered, Ariya looked up and saw the creature pinned down and struggling to shield itself from multiple angles of blows. Although it was a conjured automaton, she felt some pity at its destruction, in the same manner a piece of art could be broken. Regardless, this was no mere object. It was unleashed to kill, and if she and her peers were to survive to see daylight again, she would have to break it herself. Ariya moved towards it with determination and used her speed to increase the momentum of her arm swing. With the mace held behind, she seized the chance to deliver a mercy kill straight to the head of the elemental. To her disbelief, it was not enough, as she felt the mace's flange slide off the rocky exterior rather than biting through. Frustration boiled up from within, and Ariya cursed her physical weakness. She had given everything she had in that last strike, and it was somehow still not enough to cause even a fracture. Right as she began to further question her usefulness to the team, she heard Dodak's words cut through the fog of anger and doubt. 3 words were all it took to understand what she was missing. Channel your arc. She looked at the Sentinel, and it finally made sense as to how someone half her height could perform feats of such raw power. Ariya took a step back, closed her eyes, and did as he suggested. She recalled the lessons where she had to conjure an arrow and willed her mind to push psionic energy through the nervous system to the weapon in her hand. When Ariya opened her eyes, she noticed ghostly, transparent wisps radiating from the mace, similar to heat distorting air. With her arc successfully channeled, she pulled her weapon back and brought it down on the elemental. This time, the mace shattered the armour of its chest and sent it reeling. "That's better," Dodak praised. As damaging as that last hit was, the construct was still functional as it pulled apart the restraining vines and unleashed a flurry of wild haymakers, which Barnov and Ariya were lucky to avoid. Their advisor was not as fortunate, and a stone fist sent him crashing onto the rocky floor. Sensing Dodak's vulnerability, the elemental rushed at the halfling and raised its fist high above to deliver a kill. Zarin let out a volley, targeting the crater formed from Ariya's mace, and the concussive force pushed it back before it could flatten the Sentinel. The creature staggered and gave Barnov an opening to come from behind and drive her axe into the back of its knee. As it lowered to a kneel, Ariya saw the combined attacks had exposed a hollow cavity of coalesced arc behind the elemental's wounds. With both hands grasping her weapon, she channeled her arc once again and swung. The flanges smashed through the heavily damaged exterior and made contact with the core, obliterating it. With its heart destroyed, the woven web of arc holding its pieces together withered away, and it crumbled to rock and dust. A moment passed until everyone felt assured of their victory, and Ariya collapsed to the ground as the combat high started to recede. She was both physically and emotionally exhausted, but also smiled over delivering the final blow to the elemental. Chin, who was nearest to Dodak, helped him back to his feet and produced 2 berries he had enchanted. "Give it to her," the Sentinel pointed to Ariya. "I'm mostly intact, but she's going to need it as soon as she comes down from the adrenaline." Chin nodded and moved to Ariya before crouching down and offering the fruits. "Snack time?" Ariya asked wearily. "Your Aegis needs to be restored, or else you're going to feel fatigued and sore." Ariya expressed gratitude and promptly ate them. Like unripened strawberries, they tasted both sour and bitter, causing her to make a wretched face as her taste buds roiled from the flavours. "Are none of your medicines pleasant to the senses?" Yet when they settled into her stomach, a feeling of soothing warmth radiated and quickly spread to her extremities. Her muscles ached less, and she no longer felt the mixture of physical and mental fatigue. Matter of fact, if another elemental showed up, Ariya felt reinvigorated enough for another round. She stood up and was about to thank Chin for the aid, but noticed he had wandered off again. In their place was Sentinel Dodak. "Nicely done," her advisor commented. "Still need to work on your situational awareness, though. That's twice you were targeted for an ambush, and you're lucky you had your team to watch your back. Pay more attention to your surroundings and keep the chattiness down." Ariya wanted to retort with how he was the first to be ambushed too. However, she realised his critique was more about helping her improve, and instead replied with, "Yes, Sentinel. Good thing you got a strong Aegis and arc in you. Hopefully, you'll do more with it." The way Dodak delivered the line made Ariya feel unsure if it was a compliment or not. All she could do was give the same response she did previously. "I think I found what the Earth Elemental was protecting," Varnov called from nearby. The rest of the group gathered to her position, and she pointed to a large, vertical crack in the rock wall. "Someone's been through here, and multiple times," Chin noted. "There are foot tracks, and the edges are worn from recent rubbing." "Looks like it's the way forward," Dodak whispered. "We'll keep to the same march order." The group consented and followed the Sentinel into the breach. The journey through was narrow, claustrophobic, and uncomfortable, with many spots where they had to squeeze sideways or lower their heads to pass through. Part of the way, Dodak halted the advance as he noticed a satchel discarded before him. Inspecting it, he read stamped letterings and logos belonging to the mining company, as well as warning labels regarding the dangers of the spell scrolls it no longer contained. Assuming the bag was not trapped, the party guardedly pressed on. As the passage gradually widened, the Sentinel stopped the party once again. "I see him," he whispered, eyes lighting up like a hunting beast. Their path opened up to a larger cavern, where a Dracokin sat with their back turned to the group. "Fan out and surround him." They initially tried to approach stealthily, but their equipment bumped and clanged on the rocks, and Elitska reflexively jolted and glanced in their direction. Oddly, he turned away, as the Sentinel's team spread out to form a semicircle around him. "Uliska netrikon," the Dodak called out, with a booming voice of a much larger man. "You're under arrest for the crimes of—" The Dracokin interrupted with a loud shush. "They've just begun to fall asleep." The group looked past the cliff where he sat and saw a group of 4 strange animals. They were all tetrapods and reptilians, with grey-coloured scales and overlapping plates of natural armour across their backs and cranium. The dorsal plate nearest to the back of the neck was curved upwards at a size far larger than the others. "Ground sharks," Zarin recognised. "They're known to burrow and leave their fin exposed above ground. I'm surprised we can be this close to them since they're highly aggressive and territorial. The common grey shells are. If you look closely, these are the red-finned cousins," Ulitska indicated. They were known to be much more docile, and some were even domesticated to be riding animals. Their current infantile sizes suggested they were anything but riding-sized. "Were?" Ariya inquired. "The red-finned were thought to be extinct, but it turns out there was a brood still alive here in these mines. Unfortunately, the expansion caused a collapse and killed the parents. I found a surviving clutch of eggs here and did my best to nurse them." "You thought it justice to destroy a whole mining town just to protect them," Dodak snarled. Uliska continued with embers of hatred growing in his voice. "Foreman Driver had plans to mine through to this cavern. He and I never saw eye to eye and always sidelined my counsel. He was a person whose heart only cared about greed and gold and had no cares for the means, only the profits at the end. He often sidestepped regulations and cared not for the long-term damage to the environment. Even his own workers were often put in dangerous situations where injuries and casualties were plenty. All of these things could have been reported. You didn't have to go as far as destroying a town." My emotions admittedly got the best of me, but I did what I had to in order to buy time for more of the eggs to hatch. The company was going to destroy this cavern today, and these beautiful, defenseless animals would have been forever lost. I was not going to stand by and be a witness to that. Bureaucracy would not have moved as swiftly as I could. Ulyska turned around, but remained on his knees. I admit that I am guilty of breaking whichever laws the hegemony has codified. You may sentence me accordingly, but remember that I too acted to the laws of my culture, and Foreman Driver was anathema to them. In a way, I am like you, Sentinel. We're nothing alike, Dodak muttered as he walked up to the Dracokin, warpick in hand and lips ready to administer his last rites. A sentinel in the eyes and ears of Hegemon alias Victrix, exemplar of the Celestial Founders, and governor of the Commandery of Olgarth, I have witnessed and gathered evidence of your crimes of murder, terrorism, usage of weapons and spells of mass destruction, and widespread property damage. For these charges, I sentence you to a quick death by my hands. If the Celestials of Thanithil and the Founders find me unjust, may they smite me down where I stand. Dodak paused for a moment, as if to wait for a directive from the divine. Satisfied with the lack of an answer, he turned back to Ulyska. The Celestials remained silent. Do you have any last words? The Dracokin nodded before bowing his head low. All I ask is you promise me you'll watch over the infant ground sharks. Deliver them somewhere safe. The sentinel raised his warpick and locked his aim onto Ulyska's skull. I promise, the sentinel replied, before smashing his weapon into the Dracokin's brain. Ariya was uncertain if Dodak planned to keep that promise.